Welcome to The Explainer. This week, we're trying to piece together a pretty complicated puzzle, the cannabis puzzle. And we're doing it by looking at two brand new scientific papers that honestly could not be more different from each other. One looks way back into our ancient past, and the other is focused on a very modern and very real risk.
So, let's start with a really big question. What if cannabis isn't just a plant, but an ancient partner that our bodies have co-evolved with for over 1 billion years? Could it be this missing piece in our health puzzle that might treat a whole host of diseases? It sounds pretty wild, right? Well, that is the seriously bold theory that one new scientific review is putting out there.
But then, on the flip side of that coin, is it a substance with these lingering effects that we're only just now starting to really measure? A completely separate, very tightly controlled experiment zooms right in on a very specific modern risk, driving.
Okay, let's dive into this. We've got one paper that's kind of like looking through a telescope at the grand sweep of history, and another that's using a microscope to examine one single crucial moment. It's a fascinating look at how science actually works. First up, Part 1, a billion-year partnership. Let's explore that big evolutionary theory. This one comes from a paper called Future's Mirror, and trust me, the claim it makes is absolutely staggering. The whole argument of this paper is pretty much captured in this one quote. To understand the role cannabis could play in our future, in our medicine, they argue we have to look deep into our evolutionary past. And when I say deep, I mean really deep.
Just look at this timeline. It really shows you the sheer scale of what they're talking about. The paper points to our endocannabinoid system. That's the network of receptors in our bodies that cannabis interacts with, and says its origins trace back 600 million years. The implication is huge. For nearly all of animal history, our bodies have been evolving right alongside these plant-based chemicals.
Right, so if this evolutionary partnership is a real thing, what does it actually mean for us today? Well, the paper argues the implications are profound and could totally reshape modern medicine.
And this gets to the core of their claim. The paper isn't suggesting cannabis can treat just one or two things. It pulls together research pointing to its potential for a massive range of conditions. The theory is that the plant's hundreds of chemicals don't work in isolation, but they all work together in what's called an entourage effect.
So this all leads to a really radical idea they call the strong hypothesis, and it completely flips the entire conversation around. It suggests that maybe we're not just finding a new treatment for diseases. Maybe we're restoring an essential part of our diet that our bodies evolved to expect, and its absence is actually what's been making us sick. Okay, now let's completely shift gears and jump to our second paper. We're going from that telescope view right down to the microscope, from a grand evolutionary theory to a very specific, very practical question about public safety.
And this is a question with some huge real-world consequences. A new study from the journal Psychopharmacology wanted a clear answer, so they tested regular cannabis users in a driving simulator, but, and this is the crucial part, they tested them after the high was gone.
The study makes a really important distinction here. We know that acute effects, being actively high, impaired driving, that's not what this study was about. It was looking for residual effects, a kind of hangover on your driving ability hours or even days later.
So how did they test it? The method was pretty rigorous. They recruited a big group of regular users, made sure they hadn't used Dinchi for at least 48 hours, they even confirmed it with a test, and then they had everyone complete a standardized driving simulation to get a clean baseline of their skills. So they ran the tests on all these people with different cannabis use histories. And when they analyzed all that data from the driving simulator, what did they find? The results were not what you might expect. The main finding was pretty unambiguous. They found no evidence of residual impairment. Researchers were looking for what they call a dose-response relationship. Basically, they expected heavier users to perform worse. But they didn't find one. After that break, more frequent use did not seem to connect to worse driving performance.
And to put this into perspective, they even compared their most frequent users to a control group of non-users. The results here are pretty striking. These bars show the driving scores. Lower is better, by the way. And, well, from a statistical point of view, there was just no real difference between the two groups. The study's authors state their conclusion very plainly. They said they, quote, found no evidence of residual cannabis effects on simulated driving performance. So in this specific controlled environment and after a 2-day break, they just couldn't detect any hangover effect on driving skills.
So, here we are. We've got two peer-reviewed papers from the same week with two wildly different approaches. One proposes cannabis as a sort of ancestral cure-all, while the other finds no evidence of a specific, lingering risk. So what's the lesson we can learn from looking at them side by side?
I think the crucial point is that science doesn't just move in one straight line. It uses both the telescope and the microscope. The first paper synthesizes a ton of existing research to ask a massive why question. The second paper generates brand new specific data to answer a very focused what happens question. And the truth is, you need both to build real knowledge.
And that leaves us right back at the core of the puzzle. As society continues to debate cannabis, the real challenge is figuring out how to balance the sweeping, theoretical potential against specific, measurable data. Answering that requires both the view from the telescope and the view from the microscope. And that seems to be the key to piecing this whole puzzle together.